Hey, this is Darrell as a service from Regarding 365. It has been a while since you've heard from us as a panel, but here we are talking about Microsoft Viva and some first impressions. And with me today, we'll just introduce ourselves in a clockwise fashion from 12 o'clock.
I'm 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Rebecca Jacks.
Thanks, Bex.
At about 3 p.m. it's Stephen Collier.
And 6 p.m. it's Philip Worrell.
Oh wow, so we managed to work in a metaphor there that we're going around a clock face, but you also talked about your local time. How about that? We are a worldwide group. We'll crack into it because we do want to have a decent discussion, and we're going to try and keep it quite fluid, but there's some interesting questions that have been raised around Microsoft Viva. We've definitely seen the well-prepared marketing, and there's been thoughts and opinions throughout the technical community. So I wanted to ask you guys, as a first challenging question, in one succinct sentence, try and describe Microsoft Viva to someone like maybe a new employee or someone who is asking you. You've probably had to do that this week. Beginning with Bex.
I would not. So I haven't had to do it yet, but in my opinion, Viva is not really a product, and I think it would serve better to explain it by the benefits that it provides. We wouldn't necessarily have it all in there, so I'd rather talk about topics and what it provides to change your working day rather than Viva. I feel like it confuses things.
I think you're going to win the prize for the least words. I would not. Steve.
I think again, I agree with Bex that you wouldn't. It's not really a name you'd sell to a user, but I think what's important about it is it's not the name SharePoint. So it may be SharePoint under the covers, but it's not the name SharePoint. And maybe not every company's the same, but I go to an awful lot where, certainly in the user space, SharePoint has gained a fairly poor reputation. So I'll be able to say, I think what I'll start with is it's not SharePoint. So we each had a word. Bill, your turn.
Yep. For me, it's basically, if someone did ask me about that, I'd say, look, it's not about the productivity tools in your Office suite that you're used to. It's not your Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It's all your things that your HR department try to get to in one way or another, probably through your intranet. Your insights, your learnings, your wellness type of things that they tend to do, along with additional things around knowledge management. But again, it's going to take a while to work out what Viva actually really is as a whole group of products, but whether it is an entire platform or not, I don't know. But I think the platform name is just separating it from the whole difference between what's productivity and what's this employee experience that Microsoft are calling it.
Yep, difficult one there. So with that framing, what would my sentence be? Because I know that it's not just SharePoint, and it's not just topics, and it's not just all of the 4 different pillars and various things. My sentence: a collection of services to help you connect with information, people, and wellness. How's that?
It works today.
Works today. They'll still go, what? I don't understand. Tell me more.
Isn't it just the stuff about your company? I don't think it would have a name. It would just be, this is where company X, where you find out about stuff. So it's like a bit like intranet. You don't normally, intranets, I don't know, you tend to give your intranet a name that feels cool and funky for your organization, don't you? You don't tend to call it some people just call it the intranet, I suppose, but...
We do.
Do you? Okay. We called it the world, because we had big visions around what it was going to be. But it's something that probably that's more joined to your brand or linked to your brand or your company rather than a Microsoft product name. I think the Microsoft product names are increasingly more challenging to use for people because they're too simple. They have weird meanings.
And I think what's getting people a bit confused too is, while there's this brand called Viva and lots of colours and interesting hieroglyphics for their icons, decipher that for me too, please, by the way. We'll have to take that to some code breakers. But Viva itself is just accessed from within Teams, so surely it's just going to be some apps and maybe extending to some web pages that give you a deeper dive.
Yeah, and in the presentation material, there's, very subtle, and more to come. So you can see this becoming perhaps a larger collection of services. So then, that's where I was like, your description works today. What about when they start adding new things in? How does that change the value proposition? I feel like Viva is more a label for partners to talk to people like myself about getting a product into the business, as opposed to talking to people who are using the product.
Phil, what about the AI aspect of this? I think that's something that the community is forgetting. While it's a reshaping of services, what do you think AI has? What sort of impacts and role does it play in this?
Well, I mean, the obvious one where the AI part comes in is in the topic section, and bringing that AI into that, and that's one of the reasons why it's got an additional license attached, because they're paying for those AI services. I mean, it's still all part of Project Cortex, but then rebranding this part to becoming as part of the whole Viva platform, as it were. I'm still not sure whether that fits properly with the rest of the connections, insights, and learnings parts. So it's an interesting choice of where they've actually positioned that, but I'm not sure that they were quite 100% sure whether they should label that under Project Cortex stuff that they were doing, or whether it was just decided, well, this will come in because it's all around knowledge and knowledge management, and that's something that you want your employees to have an experience of. So yeah, that's one part. I'm not so sure. I don't have enough information about the whole learnings part and the connections part so far. But I mean, insights, obviously we know there's AI stuff behind that, all to do with the Microsoft Graph, the mystical graph behind the scene, API behind the scenes, and picking out all your signals of exactly what you're doing and how it's affecting people around you, who you're connecting with, what you're doing, what tasks you've got outstanding, all those kinds of things. So be interesting to see how that part plays out, but AI plays a huge part in that particular aspect.
I know we've actually started on this question, but let's just put it out there and go a bit deeper. Next question is, what are your thoughts about repurposing existing services from Microsoft 365 into Viva as a brand or a bundle? Is Viva a product? Is it a label for a Teams add-on, or is it too small to productize on its own?
I've already started on that thread, I think, so I'll extend it a little bit. I think it is, it's a bundle. I don't see it as a product in itself, and yeah, it's definitely looks like they've taken things that fall under a banner that were too small to productize on their own, or would have been challenging to manage in that way, and put it together in a way that partners can help explain to businesses how this will be of value to their people.
I think it's I can't quite work out what's happened with the Viva name, because at one point I thought it's just an internal brand, or it's something that you will use to sell it to the HR department. We've come to talk to you about this EXP, Employee Experience Platform. It's called Microsoft Viva, and it's great. But then you do see little snippets of it. So like, when you see Viva Topics, it says Viva Topics at the top left. It's not, so the name does appear to users, but not inside Teams. In Teams, the Topics app is called Topics, the Insights is called Insights. It's unbranded in terms of the Teams apps, but then becomes branded in some places. That's all just a little bit odd and confusing. In terms of what it is, we know so little about how it's going to be sold at this point. We know that Topics has got a $5 per user per month charge that goes with it, and we were sort of expecting that because that's what Cortex had explained to us. There's going to be some charge just for that. But all the other modules, and some of them are linked to workplace analytics licenses, some of them are linked to, will learning have a license cost? Will it not? Will it, you pay for content? Where, all that stuff is kind of really unknown at this point. In terms of it being in Teams, I think And it's clearly going to work not in Teams if people don't want to do it in Teams. Just being in Teams is the cool now, and that's that's the way you sell it. You explain it. There's nothing about it that is inherently only works in Teams. They're all just page content. Teams is the browser, if you like, rather than Teams giving you anything much more than that. It's just cool being in Teams because people like Teams now.
Yeah, I mean, for me with this thing, Microsoft repurposed a whole host of technologies to put Teams together in the first place, right? Behind the scenes, you've got Exchange, you've got bits of Exchange and other services bits from Skype and a whole lot of new stuff on top of that. But at the end of it, users are seeing some of the underlying technologies in places. But basically, so they've taken technologies that they have and basically pushing those together to make a product, and then adding on and evolving and moving little pieces at a time with stuff. I mean, there are new pieces coming in the connections sections, so there's going to be some additional pieces on top of SharePoint and stuff to go in there, and some things around connections that have got Yammer based stuff in them. But it'll probably be less of the brands, I think, of those parts, and more of the Viva on it. I have seen a Viva app installed in Teams, which has Viva Insights, for App Insights, and things like that. So there's certainly been some branding stuff going on, but I think it's this separation between what are the productivity tools and what are the HR experience-y type tools. I think that's just so that Microsoft can differentiate between the two, into their platform. So we have two aspects of Microsoft 365. We have the productivity side and we have the employee experience side. So I think it's probably just something for Microsoft to sell it, but it just clearly says this is not a productivity tool. This is something else.
I guess how I'd answer this comes back to a dream that we all had with Microsoft 365 and the different tools what to use when. And we've tried to see that lowering of barrier and friction between changing between tools by bringing everything together and into Teams in one place, and then clicking through to a fuller experience if you need it. So I see Viva kind of doing that. I think the other key thing to this is in the name. I know employee experience is a type of product out in the market for HR and improving the employee experience, whether it be induction and hiring and onboarding. But there's also just the fact that we as users have a better experience if we have less places to go and we can find information more. And I think that's going to be while we see familiar products, what we're seeing is some of those barriers being lowered even more and being tied together with things like topics or the way that connections might work or the way that learning might come together in one place as well.
So has this already happened though? When the Yammer app went into Teams, it's now called Communities. Yeah. It's not called Yammer anymore. We're sort of taking this obsession with brand that sort of started happening with Office 365 around how many different product names can we possibly come up with and then try and teach all of our users to understand the difference between this, that, and what to use when. Never made any sense. It's what they're for, and now they're being given names inside Teams that are just their purpose. And I think there's something interesting going to be around Teams, because Teams is a bit of a weird one in that it's the name of the skin on the outside, but it's also one of the icons inside it called Teams. And I wonder whether something's going to change in that space in terms of the name on the outside becoming something else. I would think it should become the company name. And then you go into your company and then you have, here are my teams, here are my communities, here are my insights, here are my stuff. I do wonder about insights. I mean, that sounds quite a lot like Power BI purpose to me. That's what the mission of Power BI is, perhaps.
I think one of the interesting things is that they're positioning Viva as a platform, and it doesn't look like a platform to me. Teams looks like the platform, and in terms of employee experience, I think that all of it is employee experience. When you're in a workplace, everything that you touch and feel and interact with is part of your employee experience. So the umbrella of employee experience for me doesn't end at the tools that Viva is providing. It's everything. Yeah.
I think also there's a big play on this, the whole future of work and the hybrid nature of work, and that with insights, finding out more about your colleagues and with the connections, finding more about your organization. I think there's a lot more trying to make those things more accessible than being able to be talking directly to your colleagues necessarily. So there's that little element of that going on, and companies realizing that if hybrid working becomes a thing after what's going on right now, then they have tools in place to better enable that. But again, tools are only part of the equation here, because again, organizational culture plays a big part of that.
So thinking about that and maybe tying it into how some of the products we're seeing, like Yammer, being called communities. Remember when SharePoint was called Sites for a while? Yeah. So going with SharePoint and thinking of intranet, what does all of this mean for the corporate intranet? When people look at connections, as it was demonstrated in Viva, is there still an intranet there? What have we got in behind that? What does this mean for the corporate intranet?
Isn't Connections just is your corporate intranet? And it is just SharePoint. From what we can see, it's just SharePoint with some additional web parts becoming available to it. And the significant one is this thing called the feed, which seems to be the one that also has a kind of a unique mobile experience, a native mobile experience rather than a web page on mobile. So I think if you've already got an intranet in SharePoint Online, you'll just add these bits to it and then make that into what they showed as connections. So I'm not sure there's anything there other than the natural evolution that was happening in SharePoint anyway, with maybe this new component around feed. I must admit, I find feed a little confusing anyway in itself. We've already got an activity feed inside Teams. Not sure why I need another one, but we'll have to see when we get it.
Yeah, I think this is more stuff that's not necessarily fed around your work. It's going to be like dashboards and widgets and things that they're going to put in, which is not going to be your traditional intranet content so much, but can be content that can be created from things that are outside. That can be web pages or apps or things that you want you want people in your organization to take note of. So that's more than just your general standard intranet where you have pages and you have news and you have videos. It's going to be more about here. This is something really of interest to us as an organization, and we want you to take note of these things that's going to be sitting on there. And the app bar that's coming is also going to be a big part of that, as getting that information, because I believe that feed and resources and things will be coming into that as well at some stage, if you get Viva, I guess.
There are a couple of interesting things that I noticed, which was, first of all, that they didn't use the word intranet at all. So they're not taking an active punt at that, but it clearly is an intranet, and there'd be many intranets out there that look just like what they put up. But it's also a really big shot at all of the people who've been developing similar products and putting them out there, out of the box intranets. Like, it's really taking a slice out of that piece of the market. So a lot of people who have put the investment into to basically doing what we've seen on Viva, having the icon there, having the intranet surfaced within Teams, they're giving it to us.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like you said, the language is no longer including intranet. It is about these experiences that we're having all brought together within Teams, and these are just some additional experiences. But when I looked at connections, initially you see in that little frame, wow, that's just the long promised SharePoint home panel button thing that was going to be on the app bar for Teams. But I think Steve's onto something there too, that we have a feed in Teams, but there's this intelligent feed that's going to be a mobile app, among other places, to say, you might be interested in this article. Hey, such and such is talking about this. Are you interested in this kind of news or information? We'll see.
That mobile app, you see, that's the Teams mobile app. It's not a separate mobile app, as far as I can tell. If you look at it closely at the picture, you've got the other Teams buttons along the bottom. There's shifts and there's some other bits across the bottom there. So I think it's that which was the other problem with many of these products, is they all have their own mobile apps. There's a SharePoint app, there's a OneDrive app, there's an Office app. We don't want all of those. Only us would go through downloading 16 different mobile apps onto each new phone to fully consume Office 365. Users want to do the minimum they have. So the Teams app looks to me like it will be the container still on the mobile, like on the desktop.
Yeah.
And therefore they're building that functionality into Teams mobile.
Now
or whatever. Or maybe it gets renamed. Who knows? But I think it's that product rather than a separate one.
There's a question Bex asked too, which usually is associated with intranet and finding information. And that's that question of how will topics align with the likes of managed metadata and managed term sets? What are your thoughts on that, Bex?
I just hope it's easier. Topics is super exciting. Not surprised, like everyone else, that there's an extra charge for it, because there's clearly a lot of effort that's gone in there. For me, what I like is that they're setting it up in a way that we can have subject matter experts across the business contributing to that and managing it. So I just hope it's super easy. And if the term store goes away, cool, as long as it's replaced by something that's super easy. Because term store's gross.
That was a knowing nod there.
And hopefully just getting away from the concept of users having to tag their documents. That's just the barrier to the person saving it, and they don't really perceive the value in doing it, and that adds to it's a frustrating system to use this. Whereas if the AI is automatically, as we say AI, I much prefer to call it the search engine. It's extracting terms from it and associating you with particular topic pages, then that's all automatic. And so you get all those benefits that we've tried to show companies for years through managed metadata, of having organization, having structure, without the grief of all the users having to put all that effort in up front, because it's a tough sell, I'd say, to users to do that consistently and accurately.
Yeah. I pretty much agree with that, Stephen. Basically, it's a hard sell to get anybody to do stuff that they don't see the value in doing. Even labeling documents in any way, even naming them in a particular way, giving them a naming convention, is very much it's very much hard work. Even trying to get people into a fixed folder structure or something, or even in many cases to even upload documents is difficult for some people, in that they keep everything to themselves because they see that's where their value is, because it's in their content, when as opposed to their own skill set and then the collaboration part. So yeah, I'm hoping that I think they revamped Term Store a while ago, and think so. I think there was something in the message center about it today, but as well. But so we'll see how that whole thing plays out. But yeah, I mean, I don't think, obviously people shouldn't go away with the idea that Topics actually does all that marking necessarily for you, because that's still, I think that's still not quite entirely there. But yeah, it makes it easier to find stuff without actually having to tag it. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're right that it's not quite there, but I think the way that they're positioning it as something that we can distribute to SMEs is a really, really big step. Because with the Term Store as it is, I'm thinking in terms of how we use ours, it's a big stretch to give lots of people access to Term Store because of the damage they can do.
Yeah, you're right. That democratizing of Like I think of the folksonomy side of managed metadata, and I know we're getting into some concepts that probably some people don't even think or know of that were a part of SharePoint, but being able to suggest a term and then a search admin, or sorry, other a metadata admin will come and make that maybe as part of the official taxonomy. And so what we're seeing, I think, with topics, well, maybe we're still exploring it, is it's opening it up, like your point, Bex. You can have subject matter experts that are involved in this, but it's a friendly experience. And then you still have, over and above that, some admins of topics that will approve, organize, exclude, all those sorts of things that you might need to do in a managed metadata level. All right.
Is it really new though? Because, and I appreciate that there's some magical AI sprinkled in there, but SharePoint in the old classic used to have metadata-driven navigation, and then you could build your pages up search terms driven by that metadata to create topic pages being driven by a search engine. And I think it's just I think the outcome is similar, hopefully better, and maybe a little bit more curated than just purely search-driven. But the outcome is really, you create these topics, and that was something that was a SharePoint feature, only before modern, and that never made the path across to the new navigation interface.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an old thing that they've repackaged, and to what Phil was saying about people not seeing the benefit to tagging and things like that. If they're not seeing that immediate benefit, they're not going to do it, because what's in it for them, right? But bringing the subject matter expert closer to it, subject matter experts will see the benefit, I hope, because they will see that that people will be able to get easier access to the information, and they'll have control over it.
Yeah, so the one line I've heard around topics from Microsoft is, try and sell it as Wikipedia for your organization, but that scares me a bit, because it basically, we know how reliable some of that information is out on certain websites like Wikipedia, where it's created by certain individuals who push things to their own way of thinking, and then it doesn't necessarily always work. So you have to keep an eye. You have to keep some of these things still in check, even though there's AI behind it. But to your point, Stephen, about it originally being a feature in SharePoint, I think a lot of these features is they'd like to have done it in stuff when it was on premises, but they didn't have the control or the push or the ability to say, hey, here's a boatload of processing power behind this stuff, and we can do some of this stuff for you. But again, Topics is a chargeable product, so basically you're paying for that extra processing power to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I see that, but SharePoint's got a search engine. The search engine reads the document, it extracts content, it ranks it, it works out the important phrases that it's going to put higher in the ranking algorithm. Okay, so now that's being done by an Azure AI service, but it's still the same original concept, isn't it? Is it really a different way of thinking about it, or is it just?
Well, I think also there's the thing that it's gone beyond just SharePoint with some of this stuff, whereby obviously the search engine with Microsoft Search is going further afield around all the workloads, into the depths of Office 365, and with connectors and stuff that you can do that. You can do that beyond that. So the idea of gradually bringing in services from other places and making it beyond just what's in SharePoint is also one other key thing there. But you're right in terms of you most of the things in search, if you have someone who can spend the time and has the relevant knowledge in specialty in search to be able to set some of this stuff up and maintain it, that's a different thing. The topics, I think, democratizes a lot of that. In terms of that you get to teach it what you want it to know, and not specifically spend a ton of time building up your search capability and your search skills out of one person who doesn't necessarily know what the topic actually is and what's important to the organization and what's not.
The next question we'll move on to is probably quite a short one, because I think we've really started to identify how people will interact with Viva, but think about how would you encourage adoption of the Viva apps. I think maybe it is still a question of adoption, because services like Insights, some I've heard commentary saying, it's really not really in my wheelhouse, I'm not really interested so much in my well-being or how I'm working, whereas others might find that kind of information helpful to improve their remote working and hybrid working experience. So thinking about that question, how might you encourage people to adopt the various pieces of Viva?
I don't think it requires a different approach than adoption of any other tool or product in the set. So, if I think about Insights, out of all of the tools, that's an interesting one, because I think there's a personal aspect to that. There'll be people who go, I don't care about that stuff. Some really useful stuff in there for managers. So if I was talking to our business about Insights, I'd be going straight to our people and culture team. They'd froth over it. They'd be super excited because it's really cool stuff. And then we do some sessions to demonstrate it to people, provide information so that they can understand how it can be of benefit to them.
And I think Insights is I'm one of those people who wouldn't be that keen on the Insights one, and particularly all of this sort of mindfulness, the headspace, all of that stuff kind of coming into it. I really question why that exists. I understand that companies will buy it. Companies will buy it because all the same companies will also buy Myers-Briggs analysis, who'll buy personality analysis on interviewees, all of that kind of pop psychology stuff that gets sold in businesses. I don't think it's any more valuable than that. And I don't see why we should be mindful and not be giving people also homeopathy and acupuncture and all of those other things in the enterprise. I know companies will go for it. I know it tricks all the right messages in HR people's minds at the moment about how to deal with the isolation and the lockdown and all that kind of stuff. I just don't. I would say take that money and spend it on giving your lowest paid workers pay rise. That's better for company culture and strategy than any of that other stuff.
The timing of it is perfect, because I think if we'd have been talking, a year and a half ago about this, it would be a harder sell.
Yep, I'm agreeing with that one on both of your both accounts there. The whole well-being stuff. There'll be people who will just lap this up. There will be people who just live for these things. They love to do their certain amount of meditation and all that kind of stuff. And there's quite a bit more into it in there, and I think there's some interesting things. I think like the virtual commute at the end of the day to kick off to clear your tasks and all those kind of things, so that you can close things off and not be confronted with them first thing in the morning thinking, I did that. If you've got that done. And I think it could be some interesting things come into that. I'd be more interested in like a dashboard that tells me those things that I haven't done, or those things that I need to get done, or those emails I may have missed, or messages, something. And with that rundown of my feed of my day, what's coming up. That's the sort of thing that I'm more interested in than necessarily the wellness parts of it. But I know there are people and organisations that do it, and as long as it's optional and that you've got some configuration options if you want to use it, then I don't see a problem with that if people want to do it. Again, I think it's a case of people picking and mixing what they want and what they don't want, what they think is the right fit for their culture and what they want to convey to their organisation. If they don't want the insights, don't do it. If you want it, take it. I think it's with the email that comes out regularly, the Cortana email that we get, the weekly analytics stuff. We tell people, look, there's an unsubscribe button if you don't want it. If it's giving you stuff and if you look at it and it prompts you for something that you may have forgotten and it gets you through the day, parts of your day, why not? And use that booking of your focus time, because it's really that part I find really useful.
I think connecting this to the question about how to get people to adopt this, and there's probably some things here that we're we're not seeing yet. But we've seen this pattern with the communities in Yammer, that I believe some of these apps will have something to say, something to suggest, and we'll see more within the team's activity feed. So you'll probably have a suggestion there to say, check out your insights, and it might have an insight to lead you into that. And for other things as well, we see that you've been discussing this topic frequently, so or you have been connected to this topic as an SME. Would you like to confirm that? And so those sorts of signals will probably lead into that activity feed. That's where I'm hoping to see it, so it becomes one place to manage that. And if maybe, like some of you have said, insights isn't your thing, then you could go in hopefully and turn off that notification if it's not something that really interests you. I guess on side note for me, and commenting on the insights thing, I'm probably one that will find it useful. I have found it useful to set focus time, and to also see, are there people that I'm losing connection with that I should actually focus on and keep up to date with? And yeah, we'll see what sort of coaching it gives me there. But I think too, as you've all said, the current conditions that we're all going through, while some of us have managed to find patterns for ourselves and we're working away at it, some of us do need some of that coaching to try and keep ourselves into a good space and look after our well-being of remaining connected with people in our organisation. Our last question, and again this could be quite short too, but I'm just really interested to know what each of you would be focused on within Viva as various things are being released. We know Topics is available now. It looks like we've lost Stephen. He might come back. But yeah, what would you be focusing on next as it's released? What are you interested in mostly within Viva?
Definitely Topics is the most appealing. I'm thinking about it in terms of to get this into the business, I have to put together a business case, and that's the best business case, because I see the most value behind it in terms of knowledge and the information that it will provide to the business. It's a lot more tangible, easier to get money for, having said that. But yeah. Mm-hmm. It's never easy to get money for things, but there's definitely a value proposition there, and it's cool, you know, as an intranet person, being able to have a way to structure that information and have it, the way it surfaces is really sexy and cool, and you know, something that I've wanted before when designing intranets, to get that kind of, you know, automatic. Having a word be identified as a topic, and then being able to click on or hover over that word and get the topic card, it's gold.
Mm-hmm. And there's currently a 30-day free trial going for Topics as well. So for organisations that just want to try it out, they've got the option to do that. So it's kind of cool. But for me, the interesting part for me right now is probably the learning part, being able to integrate all those learning sources. No matter how hard you try with an LMS type situation where you try and centralize all your learning, there's always learning elsewhere. You know, there's always some service or some material or something that you have that just either doesn't fit in a specific platform or isn't all there. There's something, and and no matter how you try, there's always something that creeps in somewhere. So being able to get that out and being hopefully being able to, for that to use some sort of AI behind the scenes as well, to say these things are mandatory, but these are the things that you're looking into. These are the stuff that is probably going to be a course somewhere that you're working with, some project or whatever that's around some topic, and it will basically then give you, hey, these might be interesting. You're doing some agile development at the moment. Here's a course on agile. Here's something on. Here's something on arranging conferences, or here's something on better meetings, or all those kind of things would be really useful. And it shouldn't matter where that stuff comes from, but to be able to have it in one place will be really valuable.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in the learning side of it too, and I see a connection between that and topics. That topics will. Steve's back in here. Let's see if we can bring him back in terms of a feed. That will probably see learning be part of. When they're talking about employee experience, what they're really interested in is retaining knowledge and information and people, because they all want to be able to learn and to increase and develop their position within the organisation and as a person. But I'm interested to see what is going to happen in that learning space. At the moment, you've got multiple different external sources. I want to see how this connects through to the likes of learning pathways or custom content you might have created in SharePoint. And as to the tagline of learning in the flow, I think most of that's going to happen from the likes of topics, and that the learning app, from what I saw, is connecting to larger, longer courses, an ability for a manager to assign learning to you, or you to manage your own learning playlist, and for you as a team to talk about your learning as you go. So that's probably what I'm going to look into. I'll just recap the question there too, Steve, because I know you dropped off quickly. We're finishing on the one about no worries. That out of the Viva services that you can see and that are coming or that have already launched, what's the thing that you're going to be looking in that mostly interests you?
I think the SharePoint Home app, or Connections, whatever it's called, is the one that I can see the most immediate benefit from. I can see topics being, some companies will go for it, but I can't see it being universal. Learning, I'm a little I don't know enough about learning to know yet. I would say that every learning management system has always sold itself on being the one learning management system you'd need, and every time you buy one, you end up with one more. And many organizations have many learning management systems. I just feel it might end up being another one. It'll have to be really good to be the one. And will it be when it first comes out? They tend not to be. They tend to be competent when they first come, rather than the one. And insights, again, like workplace analytics, I can't see a major uptake. There'll be some companies who'll love it, but I can't see everyone going out to buy workplace analytics licenses to get the manager and company stuff. The internal stuff, which is there today, and it's starting to turn up in people's teams' tenants. It's novel, but it's not changed my world, having insights available to me so far. So yeah, Connections, and really embedding your brand and your company name and your mission inside your team's client as a single front door. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining and sharing your insights or your thoughts and your opinions around Viva. I know that it's early days, but it's been interesting to hear from you some real reactions rather than just going along with the messaging and thinking about that, because the tech community is talking about it, and beyond that, our employees will be talking about it too, as things start to appear in the product. How we can help people to understand what this is and why it's going to be useful to their experience. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in to watch this video and to catch up. We'll continue to create content regarding 365 in the typical professional fashion. You probably didn't hear because I muted quickly, but there's some concrete cutting going across the road, so hopefully that didn't make it in there at all in little cuts and pieces. But we'll see you again soon, and bye for now.
Thanks, Darrell.